Welcome to the Futurist Mom, where today we're tackling something every parent and every person recognizes, but few of us know how to address, which is how to cope with feelings of fear and overwhelm, and in turn, help our kids do the same. Because while our children are navigating a world that moves faster than any generation before, traditional advice like just calm down or be brave isn't working. In fact, it often makes things worse. As a mom, I can say that is absolutely true. I have proof. Hi, I'm Nancy Giordano, a futurist, author, and yes, mom of 3, who wants all kids to feel confident and well prepared to thrive in this fast-changing, but I believe extraordinary future. And today we get to talk with a real expert on the topic. Dr. Mary Poffenroth is a biopsychologist and fear researcher who believes we've gotten fear all wrong. Instead of treating it as the enemy, Mary's groundbreaking work shows us how to transform fear into a tool for growth, courage, and resilience. First-generation college student who began her career at NASA's astrobiology unit, Mary has dedicated her life to understanding how we do scary things, and importantly, how we can help our kids do them better. Mary holds a PhD in psychology and 3 master's degrees and has taught nearly 20,000 students at San Jose State University since 2007. Her award-winning new book, Brave New You, Strategies, Tools, and Neurohacks to Live More Courageously Every Day, translates this cutting-edge neuroscience into practical techniques. Mary will share the science-backed neurohacks that can help children move from feeling constantly triggered to calmly thriving. Tools that don't just help them cope, but actually rewire how they respond to fear and uncertainty. Welcome to the Futurist Mom, Mary. We're so relieved to have you here. Hello, Mary. Welcome. I'm so excited that you're in this conversation with us. Actually, a really needed conversation. So I'm not just excited, I'm relieved to have this conversation with you.
Excited to have this conversation with you, Nancy. It's, again, like you said, needed, and I think a really unique opportunity to explore these big topics that a lot of times are not talked about and they really need to be.
Well, and I mentioned it in your intro, but I'll just, emphasize the fact that you've got these 3 intelligences that are woven together, an understanding of our biology, an understanding of psychology, and you spent time literally getting a master's in how to communicate the science to those of us who don't spend as much time with it as enticingly and as clearly as possible. So I really appreciate that you're going to give us an example of how you do that, because there were so many questions that we have around this conversation of fear and what it really, does for us or against us. There's a friend of mine who he's raised in the Christian Science tradition, and he was taught that fear, the acronym, is false evidence appearing real. Have you ever heard that before?
I have. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes those fears are very real, and to
Right.
discount them doesn't remove their power. It just makes them worse, and now you feel ashamed for being afraid of things like climate change and, ice and all of these things that we're having to deal with in the 2020s, like a global pandemic. Those are very real fears, and to say oh, it's just in your mind, that's A, not true, and B, makes the person feel just really dismissed and that they should just suck it up and not, feel feelings, because that's totally a healthy way to live.
Well, so let's just back up and have this whole conversation. What got you really interested in studying fear? Not so much from your personal story yet, but just like from a curiosity perspective. There's so many things you could be applying this extraordinary intelligence of yours toward, but somehow fear really was the thing that was most curious to you. Was it just understudied? Do you think that we just have such a misunderstanding of the role that fear, what it is, and the role that it plays in our lives?
I think it's really multifaceted for me, and for me, there's a really hard kind of answer to give to pull apart my personal story with my professional one, because they're completely intertwined. There's not really a stop and start point to who I am as a person and what I do professionally. And like you had mentioned, I have a very traditional background in biology and psychology and science communication, but those things were always something that I felt were part of the same vertical, even though if you talk to many biologists and traditional scientists in chemistry or physics, many people still don't believe psychology is a science, and that's a different discussion altogether. But for me, I think that especially when looking at such a complex organism like humans, you can't just say, oh, I only am going to look at the physiology. I'm only going to look at the anatomy. I'm only going to look at what's wrong with our psychology, which is the traditional background of psychology was broken about us. And if you really want to operate within the kind of human optimization space, you have to really understand and pull together all of these things, because we spend every day that we're alive utilizing these different systems, and they all interact with one another. In terms of what drew me to fear as, and conversely, fear and courage as a way to study, is that there wasn't really anything that I could find around science-based tools that people could use with just everyday normal experiences of how we move through the world. And a lot of the studies, a lot of the tools out there were in effort to help those that had a pathology of some kind, let's say a phobia or severe anxiety that is in a clinical setting. I'm a non-clinical psychologist, meaning that I don't work with patients, but I work in human optimization. And I wanted to create a set of tools that I wish I had when I was growing up, that I wish I had in college. And I didn't. There was no discussion of these things. They're definitely not in my household, not in any of my schooling, whether that was K-12 or university. And I think that looking back, I could have, and I feel like, I've done a lot in my life being a first generation college student, and having the background that I do that we can get into later. I've done a lot of things that I really wasn't born to do. And but I imagine I could do so much more and have other bigger adventures if I had these tools when I was growing up or even in college.
It's funny because I think about the name of my company is Play Big. I've been so influenced by Marianne Williamson's essay about
Yes.
not it's not our fear, it's our greatness that we're sometimes most intimidated by, and that our playing small doesn't serve the world. This whole idea about playing big, but really it's about getting fear out of the way. If
Yeah.
there's that wonderful saying that says everything you want is on the other side of fear. And
Sure.
yet I feel like we are very gripped by it and increasingly so. And we're watching it, I think, trickle into our families and into our children's lives and into their sense of self younger and younger and younger. And I think this is why this is a conversation at this moment in time is so important. You're also a professor, right? You work with college students and have for many, many years. Are you seeing a shift in how they experience or feel fear? Like, has it gone up? Are they able to talk about it more? Like, what is the shift that you may have seen in working with students?
Yeah, I think that in terms of feeling it, absolutely continues to ratchet up each and every year. And there's those fears are changing. They're, I think, like becoming more piled on than they have been in other years. And we just continue to pile these things on our students and our kids, and we're not giving them any way to release that tension, to move through that tension. We're just giving them more and more to be worried about, to be anxious about. In my kind of observations, I feel that generations that are in university right now are more comfortable talking about these things than they were when I first started teaching almost 20 years ago. Part of that, I think, is because they have this ability to connect to one another in digital spaces. But also, on the other side of that, digital spaces are making them more anxious
It's
and afraid
interesting,
because
right? Yeah.
now they don't get to live in a nice little bubble of, let's say, you went to a traditional university at 18 and you are just living on campus and it's just you and your friends in your classes and it's hard, but you're living in this beautiful little bubble, let's say in the early 90s, where if it was something really big, it made it to the news. But for the most part, it was local stuff. It was worried about your finals and worried about, oh, what do I want to do with my life and these normal things. And now we get to experience fear on a global, minute by minute type of thing, and our brains just weren't designed to do that. And we are overwhelmed. We don't have, like, our just brain physically can't understand the level of emotional strife and geopolitical struggle that we're constantly being bombarded with. And if we don't have ways to deal with this, it's not, things aren't going to get better for us health wise. It's not going to get better for us in terms of what we can do to change our world. Because if we're in hyper vigilance, if we're in overwhelm, we just want to stay in our blankets. We don't want to go out and change the world. We're just trying to survive.
Yeah, and if anything, then we resist the new information that comes in because we think that it just becomes
Yeah.
more challenging. I mean, one of the things that I've thought a lot about in my keynotes that I've done for many, many years is that I really felt like my job was to go in and just try and reduce fear, like reduce the arousal state of the amygdala, which we'll talk about in a moment,
Mhm.
because that way people can then take in new information, right? If I can just calm people down, John Hagel has written about the journey past fear. Like we're becoming more clear about what how much hostage it takes of us when that happens. And yet at the same time, to your point, it's pinging us all day long. It's pinging in our phone all day long. And when, and I think again, this is not, I know your area of expertise is not with young children, and neither is mine necessarily. But my observation again is when people don't understand what's going on for kids, because they're seeing this and feeling this all day long. And to the point that they've been doing active shooter drills in their school since they've been in kindergarten, right? And
Yeah.
for people to understand what that feels like, or just to imagine, like you talk about like what was college like in the 1990s, imagine what like first grade is like now in 2025.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different kind of feeling. Not to mention then all of a sudden your classmate disappears from ice, or your neighbors or your parents are talking about that. That's a whole nother level of it. And the lack of control that children in particular
Yes.
have around it. You could decide if you're afraid of violence in your neighborhood that you could decide not to go to the post office or not to go to a big concert or whatever. My teenage son at one point was afraid of going to movie theaters when so much of this stuff was going on. But you can't, kids can't say, I don't want to go to school. And so they
Yeah.
have really figured out of some way, I guess, of metabolizing. You know more about what's going inside their bodies than I do, but to somehow just like keep going forward. I think we've developed, I'm sure, all kinds of interesting coping strategies that we'll have to go back and examine, 20 years from now.
Yeah. I know, definitely. And think about, so energy is finite. Not even children have an infinite pool of energy. And if they're having to devote so much physical, emotional,
Yeah.
mental energy to things like worrying about active shooter drills in first grade, that means that energy can't be put into positive things like growing, learning, experiencing joy, truly playing without feeling that kind of low level fear. Because fear is not just a, you know, either a 10 or a 0. It's, it's on a continuum. And what is that going to do to their development, like developing minds, as they're not focused on expansion? That when we are afraid, we're focused on staying small, staying hidden, and trying not to make waves, not trying to grow and expand. And it'll be something that our entire society is going to have to reckon with. And I think that a lot of that, the kids that were young when we first started doing active shooter drills here in the United States. I don't remember when that first started, but I want to say that they're probably already either coming into college age now,
Yeah.
or just about. And I think we're absolutely going to see the negative impacts of that also on things like innovation. Because if you want to innovate, you have to be comfortable with risk. And to physically innovate, as you know, you have to have your prefrontal cortex engaged and online. And that doesn't happen when you're in a fear arousal. If your amygdala is fired up, your prefrontal cortex, that is that seat of innovation, just doesn't work. And so how are we going to come up with these new solutions to complex problems when all of our brains are just stuck in
Oh
this
my God, that's such a huge thought.
I'm
That's a really,
afraid mode?
yeah, that's a big idea. The one anecdotal experience that I had with this is I was running TEDx youth events for about 6 years. I think I did six of them. And in the beginning, we did the same thing that we did for adult events, which is that people put an application together to be able to attend. It was not choosing whether or not you could go or not go. It was literally just a way of being able to ensure that people who were attending were doing it because they wanted to be there, not because their parents forced them to be there or their teacher was giving them credit.
Yeah.
Like we were going to do all kinds of really, interesting content. We wanted to make sure that students, and this was middle and high school students, were coming because they really, had a natural curiosity. We'd rather have, 100 really curious kids than 500 kids that were forced to be there was kind of our thinking.
Yeah.
And so we asked people to put together an application. Over that period of time, Era, we saw less and less and less kids being willing to take, to do basically an application to attend because of the fear of rejection. And it became so
Mm-hmm.
acute that we started calling it something else. And finally, we just described it as an expression of interest so that it would be non threatening for people to
Yeah.
go because they just felt like there was, and again, we're seeing this not only like the existential stuff that we're talking about in terms of in their kindergarten classrooms or in their neighborhoods, but also like trying to apply for a job right now and getting constantly rejected and
Yeah.
feeling that sense of, I don't know if fear would be the right word, but I'm sure fear is a part of that. Like feeling you don't understand the system and you don't understand where you fit in it. And so you start to see them play smaller, which is the opposite for a woman and a mom who wants the whole world to play
Yeah.
big right now. So I'm super again grateful that you have taken the time to share your work and to write a book about it that we can all learn more from, because I think that we can have a lot of, and I do want to delve more, I think, into the what we know and what we don't understand about fear and sort of dimensionalize it and pull it apart. Because also as parents, we're carrying it and our kids are feeling it. So even if their lives were perfect and they weren't facing all these things inside their classrooms or in their neighborhoods, they feel our fear around whether or not AI is going to take our
Yeah.
job or whether or not we can trust someone with our data or whether or not we feel like the world is going to somehow hold us well as we move forward. So there's multi levels of this that we've got to learn to better understand, better tease apart, and to create pathways past or antidotes to, which your work is very hopeful in helping us understand the role that courage plays in this and courage building and how we can improve our muscles around that and continue our practice of that. So,
Yeah. I mean,
what?
courage is a practice. And coming back to that idea, kids, our coworkers, people that we don't even know when we're in fear because of the power of our mirror neurons. That it is an evolutionary, advantageous way that our species has survived by understanding when someone else is afraid of something because maybe we should be afraid of that thing because maybe they see something that we don't. So if they're going to run, we should run. And it's something that we're not necessarily going to understand is happening, but you feel it and you know it, and especially if you know that person. So even though as a parent you may be telling your kids, "No, I'm fine. Yeah, no, fine, totally fine." They know you're lying.
They can
Even
feel
if
well.
they're
They
not able
they
to
can feel you're
yeah,
lying.
they can
Yeah.
feel it. Yep. Yeah, and they may not be able to articulate it or pinpoint it, but if you're afraid and you're letting that seep out and you're not being honest about it, not only do they know that you're lying, now they're starting to lose trust in you. And the same way with leaders to teams, because they can't put their like exact pinpoint on what, but something's off and you're not telling them. You're like, "Oh, no, 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 it's in your imagination. Nope, 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 mommy's fine. It's fine." And of course, not all topics are going to be appropriate to share. Like not all struggles are going to be appropriate to share with all kids at, in the moment. But, changing that conversation around, even if it's not specific, you're like, "Oh, you know what? You're right. Mommy is kind of dealing with a lot at work today. Don't want to get into it, but thank you for picking up that I am not feeling great, or I'm feeling a bit nervous about stuff." And that could be a really great way to open it up. Like, was there anything that you felt nervous about this week or today? As like an invitation to also say, "Okay, yeah, you're right. You are totally right. I am." I don't need to say I'm worried about AI specifically because depending on the age, the kid, the kid might be like,
Right.
"What?" But an opportunity to be like, "Yeah, let's share in this totally normal, not shameful way that our brains are perceiving threat in our world. And if we can create a way to share back and forth, then it makes it safe to have those struggles in community, which that in and of itself will decrease fear."
I think this is a lesson that I'm learning as I've mentioned in other podcast episodes before about this conversation I had with my son about the things that he was afraid of recently. And I think that was basically the plea he had with me, which is not only does he want to feel understood when he's expressing that with me, but he does want to feel closer to me, right? That authentic connection that you talk about, that's so important that
Yes.
when we're able to feel like there's a safe place to be able to express our fear and someone can hold it, or you feel like they trust you with theirs, that it does create a
Yeah.
much deeper connection around all that. So I'm learning around it too. It's funny because I
We're all here
just
to learn, right?
well, it's funny because on
That's
the one hand, my daughter thinks that I don't
just
carry a lot of anxiety, right? I sleep really well. I'm not a really anxious person. I'm a futurist literally because I wanted to not be blindsided. I wanted to be able to get ahead. I'd rather just know what's coming and then learn to strategically navigate it than like put my head in the stand and be blindsided by it. That's just become my coping mechanism, is to look as far out as I can and start to build a path. But I think that, the reality is we're all have our fears of different things. And I did devote a whole year. My theme that year was becoming fearless. Like, how can I become less fearful? And you have a lot of great guidance in your book about, building, again, that courageous muscle is the way I would think about it, or like to try and take something on. They always say, like, do something one day, every day that scares you. But I think we need to get like more scientific about this. What is helpful when we're feeling it, or our children are feeling it, what is not. So one of the things I want to do is make the distinction between fact versus fiction in fear. Like, do we start breaking down, like, what do we know? What have you learned about fear that we should know and understand better?
Yeah, so let's definitely jump into the RAIN method, and that's a good dovetail of language has power. And in my book Brave New You, and for your listeners, if they go to hellobravenewYou.com, there's some free resources that they can download, including the RAIN method and some of the Neurohack quick win cards that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And within that language, also for me, being fearless is kind of a point of contention, because
Yeah.
in my experience, that's really the only advice that we've been given in a big way on how to deal with our totally normal, everyday sensations of dread and being anxious, being nervous, being, overwhelmed by whatever that is, because what I am afraid of is going to be different than what you are afraid of. Some of it's going to be similar, but we have different experiences, and just our brains are going to work differently. But that language of, oh, be fearless, sends the message that that is even attainable. And
Yeah.
it's nearly biologically impossible unless you have physical damage to your amygdala, because it's just not possible. Like, it's really not possible. So then when we say to people, be fearless, and they're gonna fail, because they're gonna still be afraid of stuff.
Right.
I'm
Right.
still afraid of stuff. And then they didn't meet this bar, and that's the only recommendation or tools that they've been given, then they feel like a failure. They feel ashamed. They feel like they can't talk to other people because everyone else is out here being fearless, and here's me hiding in my blanket fort. And so it's just
Unable to
because,
pull up
like,
my big girl
language.
pants because I just can't do it that
Yeah,
day. Yeah.
right.
I mean, just think about
Right.
these
So
metaphors that we have around it. Yeah.
yeah. And so my kind of part of my work is to change that conversation. But it to change that conversation about making it acceptable to feel sensations of threat and fear, to discuss them both with yourself, because sometimes we just pretend like it doesn't exist, and the people that are important in your life at minimum, and start to change how we navigate through those sensations, so that we have tools when those things come up in our life that are going to make us react in a way that is perceived by the amygdala as threat. And it's, one of the common questions I get is, do you never feel fear now? And I'm like, of
Mm.
course I do. I'm human. Like, these tools, like we're going to go through the RAIN method right now, are absolutely going to help. But fear keeps us alive, right? It helps us make good choices. So it's just about modulating it, not just making it disappear, because that's not really feasible. So, but jumping into the RAIN method, which is going to start, and for those listening that are driving or walking to work or school, you can definitely download this infographic as well as a tutorial video on that hellobravenewYou.com. So if you miss a piece, don't worry, it's all there for you. No sign in, no sign up. So when we look at kind of also the language around fear in the scientific literature, this is referred to as clean and dirty fear, which I feel has a lot of problems with the way that
That's such
that
an
was coined.
interesting
So I
way.
don't,
Yeah.
I'm like, no, okay. And part of that science communication piece is taking the science out of the journals and making it accessible and applicable to people's lives. So we're going to start with removing that like clean and dirty fear nomenclature, and we're going to talk about factual fear and fictional fear. So we'll start with factual fear, because that's a really easy one. That's going to be in the moment, a shared experience of everyone that is around you, and your brain is going to know what to do, right? Whether that's where that kind of like fight or flight is is going to have action being applied immediately to deal with whatever that threat is or to ignore that threat. I put myself through university waiting tables and being a bartender, so I use a lot of examples from restaurants, and also most of us have been to a restaurant. So one of my favorite examples is, let's say, Nancy, you and I we're having dinner, we're in this really deep conversation about just the nature of life, and all of a sudden we hear this breaking glass, like a lot of breaking glass. Us and everyone in the restaurant's going to stop. We're going to turn to see where that, what's coming. Like, is that something I need to deal with? And if it is a couple of burly drunk guys getting in a bar fight, well, then that's going to be a different way to deal with it than a server just dropping a tray full of water glasses. So we all react to it. That's going to be a shared moment. We're sharing that reality. If it is something that is a threat, like two guys in a bar fight that we need to then, let's say we have small children with us, we're picking up the kids and we're leaving. Yeah, we're not dealing with that. Then that's going to be an example of a factual threat to our safety, and we're gonna deal with it. Or maybe we're an off-duty police officer and we're gonna run towards it because we're gonna break up the fight. Me being a 5'2" female, probably not going to run towards the fight of a bunch of guys drunkenly trying to hit each other. But hopefully someone in the room is going to need to do that. And the other kind of fear is going to be a fictional type of fear. Now, fictional fear doesn't mean that it has no key nugget of fact, right? Just like any good story that is fiction has those nuggets of truth, either from an experience that you have lived or an experience of other people. But it's not happening right now. It could have happened in the past, or it could be ruminating about a future that may or may not exist. And it's going to be a fear that is happening inside of you in that moment. Now, it could be a shared fear that as a collective, like, everyone should be afraid around what is our planet going to look like in 10, 20, 50 years due to climate change. But in that second, are we all thinking about it exactly the same way? Right. Usually not. And so with the fictional fears, that's really where we have the most power to use these tools to navigate through them, because like these are going to be the most insidious ones that are going to keep us playing small and impact our ability to thrive and grow and change the world for a better, because we're constantly living in this fictional world that, again, may or may not have a nugget of truth, but is ruling our reality, and we're not actually staying in our reality. So kind of deciding, if you ask yourself if this is a factual or fictional fear, then you probably know it's a fictional fear, because in a factual way, your body's taking over. If the answer is, you're going to know the answer. You don't need to really ponder it. And so getting through the fictional fears is really where the RAIN method is going to be powerful. So for the first step is going to be recognize. So RAIN is going to stand for recognize, assign, identify, and navigate. So with recognize, it's kind of like in poker, you have a tell. If people can tell if you have a good hand or if you're bluffing, right? Recognize is just, what is your body's physical tells for when you are in a mild to moderate fear arousal. So if we're in an extreme fear arousal, right? If, like, I kind of have the example of hot pepper sauce, right? There's mild hot pepper sauce, medium, and hot. When things are spicy. You don't need to ask yourself, is this a really extreme fear arousal? Nope, you're gonna know it. But it's that mild and medium is sometimes hard to pinpoint, especially when we're really distracted, when we're busy, when we're overwhelmed with other things. So knowing what your body does in, like, that fear arousal physically can be really helpful. So for me, I'm a jaw clencher. I'm a shoulder scruncher. Like, my shoulders will be up around my ears. And those things are my two physical tells. Do you know what your physical tells would be when you're kind of in a fear arousal state?
Not as clear as you do. I think longer, like existential fear, like a deeper fear,
Mhm.
like dread maybe really, it goes right into my solar plexus. Like that's when I know that
Mhm.
something's like really
Mm.
intense.
Yeah.
But I think that the mild one, I'd have to think about more. Probably just get snappy.
Yeah, yeah, it could be like you just feel like you have a short fuse. Some people will have the classic, sweaty palms or dry mouth. Sometimes people will get digestive upset. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And like there's there's so many physical tells, kind of just, and the only way you really know yours is by starting to just be curious about what your body does pretty regularly when you are, let's say, under stress, because most people are going to call a fear arousal just stress. And we wear this stress badge of courage, like, oh my gosh, how are you? I'm so stressed. Me too. And then we get to high five and say that we're all really stressed. But actually,
So
it's just,
sad. That's so
that's a
true.
fear arousal. Right. Stress is a fear arousal, but we don't like to use the F word. And that, the F word is fear because it's easier, it's safer, it's perceived as less of a moral failing if you say that you're stressed.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But can I just back up for a second? So when I say that
Yeah.
I get snappy, I really do think that that is mine, but it's less physiological and more
Mhm.
emotional. So is there must be something also physiological going on at that moment, but I'm paying attention more to the the expression of it. Like I'm just curious because I really don't know the physical, but I can really tell you that when I get like really like super
Yeah. So,
defensive or
and you're
snappy, it's
probably,
because I'm
yeah,
afraid.
yeah. And you're probably also perceiving people's reactions to, let's say, your tone or being curt. We always have that other, seeing the reflection of other people's reactions to what we just said. Internally, you're like, what? That wasn't, didn't even say anything bad. And you're like, whoa, okay. So that's going to be an expression of it. Maybe you're feeding off of other people's. So next time that happens, just kind of see what's happening physically in your body that could you feel some tightness around the shoulders? Are you kind of, you know, sensing a kind of increase in your heart rate at all? It would be interesting. Now, this is going to get more data driven, but if you wear like a smartwatch, in those moments when you notice that, oh, I super snapped at somebody because I didn't want to have this conversation, and then you go back if you timestamp it, like, oh, that was 6:30 on Monday. Can you see a spike in your heart rate?
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
interesting.
I once talked to somebody, and they were saying that when like even mild or moderate kind of fear reactions, they can feel their heart like pounding against their chest, and it's something that is really over and hard for them to miss. So they know, and that comes back to like the getting curious about these things, and that they know if that's happening, they have to stop and ask themselves, okay, like, where is this coming from? Like, why am I so anxious right now? Because a lot of times we just push through. We
I
don't
was gonna
we
say, and
don't we
actually,
don't get curious about it.
what I'm also this I'm gonna take you off track for a second 'cause I know we need to go through the rest
Mhm.
of rain, but the locus of control and feeling like you have a very internal locus of control versus external, I'm sure that has to be somehow, calibrated along these physiological expressions of fear, right? I have a deep sense of a locus of control to the point where it's probably delusional, right? That I think that I can control a lot more than I probably think that I can. But as a result, I am less attuned to some of the physiological, like super sensitive reactions that I know other people who are very much more externally threatened by things absolutely feel very clearly in their body and can talk to you more, and probably heart rate and stomach and all those things like happen more. So you can either dive into that or not, but I do think that that is an interesting other angle to this, right? How much that there's a
Yeah,
whole thing
yeah.
about what you can control and what you can't, and I believe I can control way more than I
Yep.
probably can.
And that's you actually that is a great place. We'll come back to the A part, but in the identifying, because there's going to be power in pigeonholing. I'm going to talk about what that is in just a second. But if you take all of the human fears that are going to be part of those fictional fears, they generally fall into a bucket of either not feeling enough, like they're not enough, or fear of losing control. And the details will change, but that, those are those two very generalized ways to define human fictional fears. And in coming back to, noticing how you express things physically, for how you are emotionally reacting to them, or how you are behaving in reaction to something, they're all just data points, right? They're connected in the same system, and we all express things in a different way. And some people don't externally express ever because maybe they have a life experience where masking was the way to survive, right? So your brain early on and throughout your life has gotten messages, how do we best survive? For some people, it was, and this is how I was raised, you present a happy, perfect, smiley face to the world, no matter what is happening internally. You hide that. Like Elsa, you like shove it down. You don't show the world, and you're always happy, smiley because that's what people want from you. And I got messaging early on that that was safety, that was love, and to express externally any dark emotions of fear or anger or sadness was not allowed at all. And so I just masked and pretend like
Yeah.
everything's perfect.
Well, and I think
and
you had
then
an
and then
extreme
right.
well, I was gonna say you had an extreme version of it, but I think that hits home, Mary, for everybody who is a parent ever, because there are definitely moments,
Mm,
this goes back to how we react when our children are fearful and giving them
mm,
the space to be able to express that. Because I think that our natural inclination is not necessarily to go as far as they did in your family, but is to try and, like I said with my son, like try and talk them out of it or try and push them out. Like we want that the inclination comes from a loving place, even though it's doing it the exact opposite way, right?
yeah. Because we don't want people that we love to feel pain. We don't want them to suffer. We
Right.
want them to feel the good stuff, the joy and the elation and the wonder of the world. And I see it, even just like with friends or with partners, that I want to protect them from those things. But of
Well, and what they
course, you
perceive to
can't.
be as
Like,
a
yes.
now fear, like, right? It's funny
Mm,
because you say fictional versus factual, and I just realized as you were saying that for me, it's like a now fear versus maybe a narrative fear, right? We try to recategorize it for people, or like let
mm,
them know there's not really that as a threat, and try and talk them down for what they think might be a a very existential, like real, like now kind of fear. And I think if anything we take away from this conversation, there's so many more things we could talk about, and we will talk about for the next like 10 or 15 minutes. But I think the key takeaway for me would be to encourage parents to create space for their kids to be able, and for themselves, right, to check in on their own and go through the rest of the rain framework, but to practice that also with their children and just even creating space for it and then developing the capacities for being able to navigate it, I think would be a really big thing. Brene Brown got us all in touch with our vulnerability. But I think that this moment in time of really getting in touch with our fear. And the other thing that we didn't touch about in the beginning, which also I was just thinking about, is every media outlet is working overtime for us to be afraid, right? Every social media post, every news outlet, every, thing I get from any candidate that wants me to give them money, like it is all programmed on fear. So not only do we have the real world around us that we're trying to navigate, but then we're getting all of this other pressure putting around us. So I think that this taking a deep breath and recognizing how important this understanding and awareness is around what's happening to us, I think it's super, super important. So I'll get you back to Mary.
yes. And this is what I love, like having a framework for things, because I think that many people, parents especially, they don't want to do a thing until they know they're going to be perfect at it for their kids. And that stops them from doing the thing at all because they're never going to be like, no one's going to be perfect at everything. It's just not going to work. And so having something like, oh, here's a framework, which is why, on the hellobravenewYou.com, people can just download this as a PDF and just literally just walk through it with their kids. And you don't have to feel like, oh, I need a PhD in this. Just, be unafraid to stumble, right? Because I think that fear of just being seen as imperfect to those that we love impacts our ability to have those radically honest conversations, because we would rather feel like they see us as perfect than come to the reality of, I'm doing my best.
We want to feel like we can
We're all
protect them
just
at all
doing
costs. I guess I
yes,
feel like
yes,
less that I need to be perfect, but more that I want them to feel safe and I want them to feel protected. And I want to feel as though that I'm creating that safety for them. But ironically, by ignoring it, I'm creating less safety. So I think that is the key thing. So when you walk through rain, can you tell us what the four letters are again? So
yes.
recognize.
Versus recognize. And then next would be assign. So the assign is this is a reimagining of Plutocek's emotions wheel, but just with words that could be used to talk about and describe a fear arousal experience. And the reason why you want to just choose one of these words, and on the hellobravemeyou.com, you can download it as a JPEG to have on your phone as well. And you want to choose just one word for the sensation you're feeling in that moment. And people will fight me on this sometimes because they're like, there's like 4 words on here that I could use. Like, no, 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 just one, because our brains, through the act of pigeonholing, through the act of just categorizing and putting things in boxes, brings a sense of control to the amygdala to calm the amygdala down. Our brains love to feel, even if it's a lie, in control of our chaotic world. And having just that one word that you're choosing in the moment many times can completely knock that fear spiral like out of where you were going. But if it doesn't, these are meant to be, okay, recognize, ooh, all right, my body's telling me that something's going on. Now I'm going to get curious with the word assign. I'm going to choose, let's say, dread, right? And this might be, let's use the kids as an example. My goddaughter, she is in competitive gymnastics and she is like really good, but right before a big competition, she loves it, she's excited, but there's also some dread happening because of all of the things going through her mind of, oh, am I going to win? Is, like my teammates, am I going to let them down? And so just giving that one word in that moment and making it okay, right? You're like, yeah, you can both be excited and worried about tomorrow because you care, you want to do well. And it's okay to have the space for both. You love being with your friends and you love being on the mat, but also it's kind of scary because like all of these different things, and that all these emotions can sit together, and having that ability to just choose one and talk about it, I think can be really powerful with kids. Then continuing with that pigeonholing, we talked a little bit about identify, but okay, so you said, let's use that example with Madison. She's feeling dread about the big competition. It's regional finals, and like we can then talk about, okay, so if you had to just choose one bucket, just one. Now, there's complex fears that sometimes will have a little bit of both, but the point is just to choose one in this. Would you say that is that fear of not enough or fear of not being in control? And in this example, now there's no right or wrong answer, but if I was putting my Madison hat on, then I would probably say that it would be fear of not enough, that, oh, I'm not good enough to be, on the state team, or I'm not good enough to be on the mat, or I'm not good enough at the rings, whatever kind of messaging is happening in her head at the time. And by calling it out, by categorizing it, you take away some of the power, because when the fear is nebulous, when it kind of just is fluffy and hanging around and we're not really able to talk about it or name it because language has power, then it has more power over us and it continues to snowball. But by having these terms and being like, oh, okay, yeah, that's just how my brain works. I'm not broken. My brain is just being a brain, and I'm not the only one because look, it's on a card. In fact, all of humans experience these things. So I'm not being weird. I'm not broken. I'm not, doing anything out of the normal. My brain is just trying to keep me safe, and I'm helping my brain feel safer for something that I know is going to be safe. And then the fourth is going to be navigate. And on the card, box breathing, like the Navy SEALs box breathing is going to be the example given. But really, any of the quick win neurohacks can be switched out for this fourth step. And what I tell people is choose the ones that work best for you, that you enjoy, to create your own little toolbox of neurohacks that, if they're easy to remember, if you know that they work, and you know that it's going to be something that is going to impact your ability to navigate through these sensations, then you're going to use them in those kind of high intense types of experiences. None of my neuro hacks are anything that anyone would need to ingest anything, and they're nothing that needs special equipment. So they're really good for families to kind of play around with, which is why, I love play. You also love play because it helps us learn. It helps us experience the world, even big scary stuff. Like fear can be kind of a scary topic in and of itself. If we're playing around with it, then it's not so scary. That's just
I know your
how
cards are
self-play
very
works.
friendly. You get these beautiful cards around it. So in the last few minutes that we
Ooh.
have together, we didn't get a chance to really dive into, but can you just even describe what a neurohack is for people who aren't in this space all the time? It sounds like a Like, we don't know what that word is, right? But
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
way to be
So
able to
So,
yeah, go ahead.
sure, a lot of people have probably have heard like biohacking, which can mean a lot of different things. Biohackers are people trying to optimize their human experience. There's many ways to do that, and there's many ways to optimize the human experience with neurohacks. Some people will go heavy on the tech side. With neurohacking, I go on the non-tech side because I want it to be accessible to everybody, and the technology around, especially let's say decreasing fear, or in the clinical setting, a lot of that technology is super expensive or just not accessible to most people. And I like these to be things that I can have people play around with in the room during a keynote or workshop that they can do immediately. And a couple of my favorites. And so what I recommend for any of the listeners, just and there's going to be some of these cards that you can download at the Hello Brave New You, and just play around with them with your family and see if they work,
Well,
if they
just
feel
teach
a
them. I
different
think that that just
sensation.
is part of our
I
normal
am.
thing. Like, I open and close every
Yes.
keynote by taking a deep breath, and I love the fact that you teach box breathing, which again, not everyone is familiar with.
Yep, I love box breathing. There's many different types of breath work tools. I like to have one that's easy. Otherwise, I'm not going to remember it, especially if I'm
Right.
in a high stress environment. So yeah, we do like a quick round of box breathing, and I'll some quick neuro hacks, before we end the session today. So with box breathing, I'm sure when you're leading your audiences, it's always kind of funny when you're doing it on mic because you're trying to talk through while holding your breath. It's gonna be kind of funny. But yeah, so just thinking about a box having four sides, and you're just gonna take an inhale of the count of four. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're gonna hold that breath for a count of four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're gonna exhale for a count of four. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're gonna hold that breath for a count of four. And then you just repeat as many times as necessary. And a lot of these I really like because no one knows you're doing them. That you can do them
That's good.
anywhere. And,
Yeah, yeah.
before you're going on stage, before or during a presentation or during an exam, that, a lot of times exams have so much anxiety for students
Or
that,
even
and they
before you
can't,
react to
get,
somebody, you get an email from someone, right? And you just before you
yes.
react. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. A couple more that I really enjoy. So this one's called the near and the far. You can use a pencil or your finger. Just take your index finger pointed up towards the sky and bring it directly in front of your nose. And right now, without hurting your eyes, because sometimes people will try to force their eyes to look at the finger too much. So no eye strain here. So gently, your finger is right next to your nose, gently trying to focus on that finger. Of course, it's going to be too close for you to actually have it in focus, but you're just going to keep trying to get your eyes to focus on that finger pointed up to the sky. And you're going to move that finger away from your face. And you're going to take that finger as far away from you as possible. And then at some point, it becomes one finger. And then you're just going to slowly bring that finger back towards your face. And depending on where it is, then it's going to start to kind of go wibbly wobbly. It's going to turn into two. It's going to be out of focus, but that is the point. So here we are tapping into the brain's ability for convergence and divergence vision. So there's a couple of reasons why this is going to help calm down the amygdala. First is, if we think about the evolutionary advantageous behaviors that we have had, if we can focus in and out on something not close to our face in a slow movement, then we're not scanning for danger. So if our brain thinks, okay, we're not scanning for danger, it must be fine. It's fine. Also, it's an ocular kind of reset where, just like the EDMR type of things that you can have done in a clinical setting, the eyes obviously very close to the brain. In fact, there are that it is allowing for us to tap into those things in an easier way, that in a non-clinical setting, that is just giving you that reset, that your brain's going to help to calm the amygdala and allow you to bring yourself back online. Now I know we're running out of time, so I want to do just one more that is one of my
Yeah.
favorites, that is going to access the nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body. And when our vagus nerve is activated, it is going to tell our brain, okay, amygdala, we can take it down a notch. We can calm our breathing. We can decrease our heart rate. And there's quite a few ways to activate the vagus nerve. This is just going to be one of them. So if you take I'm right-handed, so I start my right to left, but it doesn't matter which way you do. So I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to make an L with my thumb and forefinger. And then with my right thumb and forefinger, I'm going to make kind of like a pincer. And I'm going to not like the flabby, fleshy bit in between your thumb and forefinger on your left hand, but more the meaty bit, that kind of valley that your thumb and forefinger make. Go ahead and just massage that. Now, you don't need to dig in real hard because you don't want to leave a bruise, but enough where you can feel that pressure. And through the radial nerve, you're activating that vagus nerve. And this in traditional Chinese acupressure called the Hegu meridian. But to just give it something fun to remember, I call it pinching the valley. And this is one of my favorite ones that I do all the time. Again, because it's something that you can do anywhere that you are feeling like, okay, I just need a little bit of stress relief. And this is one that I feel immediately. And with these different neurohacks, play around with the ones in a low to medium stress environment and see the ones where you start to feel a difference. For me, I mean, I feel a tingle from the top of my head, like down my spine, when I do this one, and I feel like I feel a sense of calm, and just that's why I love the cards because they can be literally in your back pocket for the ones that work
And
well.
so to your point, at any moment, I was taught that one, the pinch the valley, since I was a little kid. Actually, I went to a doctor when I had migraines when I was really young, and they couldn't figure out other ways to help. And so at some point, it was just like pinch this. So I was taught that, and never understood why. Should be doing that to try and help calm my whatever myself or my head down when I was facing the onset of a migraine. So maybe that's why I can sleep so well now, Mary, because I've been doing that since
I
I
love
was
it.
8.
Yeah.
I've been pinching
I
the
love
hell out of
that.
that valley over the course
Yeah,
of
right.
time.
Just like, yes.
But I'm like, when I saw your cards, I'm like, wait, that was really real. I thought that was just a doctor who didn't know what else to do and was trying to give me something to distract me. I didn't realize I've been neurohacking all this time. Who
I
knew?
love it. I love it. Yeah, and it's just so many of these kind of like tricks that a lot of this knowledge isn't easily accessible or is through just a physician or a clinician. When you go to have a problem addressed, and many times in modern medicine, because we've created a system where doctors only have 20 seconds to be with each patient, they're just prescribing because it's the quickest way to try and alleviate pain and suffering is with a pill or with a prescription, instead of having these different ways that, not to be anti big pharma, that's definitely not what I'm saying, but there's many other ways to navigate life's challenges than just, oh, you come to your physician or your clinician with a problem. Well, HMOs are only giving me 10 seconds with you. So how can I help you
Right,
in seconds?
right.
10 seconds. Okay, great. Bye. See ya. And
Well,
even
hopefully
thinking
these are
about,
now.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, no, go ahead.
go. Sorry. No, I was hoping that ChatGPT has got your library or a library of these things, because I'm imagining my daughter or others who are in that moment, right, and don't, to your point, have time to talk to their physician or don't even know, who they would go to. But it's like I'm feeling all these things. Like I would like this to be in the nomenclature and in the understanding of how it navigates in real time things that feel overwhelming or things that feel dreadful or things that feel scary and whatever. I mean, I love the dimension of all the words that you have, all the things that we could feel, but I would love to think that it shows up now and more in common wisdom that this is available to us.
And that's kind of the goal of my work too, of how can we make it more acceptable and less shameful to both feel these things, but also talk about them and exchange tools that, like, oh, I found this new tool. And one of my favorite things is when people come up to me after a session of some kind, and they're like, oh, have you ever heard of fill in the blank? This worked like you just did with me. Like, oh, when I was 8 I was taught to do that and it helped so much. It's such a powerful community position to be in when we can start pooling our knowledge and finding new ways to move through this normal human experience.
And the work that you're most passionate about right now is going out to audiences and going into workshops and helping people really hear this knowledge and hear this wisdom from you directly, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that I really truly enjoy doing live audience stuff, and I'm able to bring that sense of play into a topic that a lot of people shy away from, just like I said, F words in your people's repertoire. Fear is a really scary one. It's one that people stay away from, just even the word itself. And if I can make it fun and playful in addition to something that is going to be educational for them, but also something that they can take back to their families and their teams and the people in their world, that ripple effect, I think, is one of the most powerful types of outcomes that I hope for my work.
Well, I am so grateful for this conversation and for everyone's attention listening to this entire conversation. And I think, again, what I hope that people take away from this is that fear is pervasive. It's going to become more and more intense because of the escalation of experiences that are happening around us and the pace of change that's happening, and because of the incentive structure that we have in so much of our media right now to prey on it. So we have got to develop more sophisticated understanding of it and much better tools around it. And to your point, much less shame and silence around it, and be able to talk about it both to ourselves with more distinction and with each other with more compassion. I think it's a really huge part of this. And then I appreciate again that you've got both the RAIN method, which is about recognize, assign, identify, and navigate. And then
Yes.
you can go into a lot more detail about this on your website and in your book, and then the neurohacks that you give us to be able to every day have those both in our mental and in our physical pockets, so that we don't feel as though we will be taken under by it, but that we can actually face the world with a lot more calm and be able to hold space for others that are learning this too. So I'm hoping teachers pay attention to this. I certainly hope again that families are paying attention to this, but I think that if we can get much more deeper our understanding of this, we'll all be able to navigate the world and be able to do. To your point, the last thing we want is people who are not innovative, right? And the people who are afraid of being to play too small. So thank you so much for digging in deep and helping people play bigger, Mary. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Nancy.